Welcome back to Mr. Shadow's Stories, the place where the lights go out and the stories begin. If you're watching this right now, I want you to do something for me. Stop whatever you're doing, turn the volume up, and whatever you do, don't look behind you. Because tonight, we are stepping into a world most people never see. A world that exists after midnight, in the skeleton frames of unfinished buildings, in the hollow bones of construction sites, where steel groans in the wind, where shadows stretch longer than they should, and where the darkness has a way of hiding things that should never be seen. Tonight, I have 3 stories for you, 3 real accounts from real people. Men who clocked in for an ordinary night shift and clocked out with something they will carry with them for the rest of their lives. These are not campfire tales. These are not fiction. These are true horror stories from overnight construction workers who looked into the dark and found that something was already looking back. So settle in, get comfortable, and whatever you do, try not to be alone tonight. Let's begin. Story 1. The Man Who Wasn't on the Crew. Music shifts, slightly heavier, slow, tense. This first story comes from a man named Derek. He submitted it to us a few months ago, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since. Derek was a 34-year-old construction site supervisor. He had been working in the industry for over 10 years. He was experienced, level-headed, and not the kind of man who scared easily. He had worked hundreds of night shifts across dozens of different sites. He had seen accidents. He had dealt with dangerous situations. He was, by every definition of the word, tough. But nothing prepared him for what happened on a cold Tuesday night in late October. The site was a large commercial building project on the outskirts of a mid-sized city. The structure was about 6 stories tall at that point, still incomplete. No walls on the upper floors, just concrete slabs and steel beams stretching up into the night sky. The crew working that shift was small. Just Derek and 4 other workers. Their job was simple: monitoring equipment, doing safety checks, and making sure no structural issues had developed overnight. Everything started normally. The crew clocked in, did a brief walkthrough, and then split up to cover different sections of the site. Derek handled the upper floors himself. He always did. He liked the quiet up there. He liked being above the noise of the lower levels, looking out over the city lights while he worked. Around 1:30 in the morning, Derek was on the 4th floor doing his safety inspection. He had his flashlight, his clipboard, and his radio. He was moving methodically through the floor, checking anchor points and marking off his checklist when he noticed something that made him stop. At the far end of the floor, maybe 60 feet away, a man was standing in the darkness. Derek froze. He shone his flashlight in that direction. The man was just standing there, completely still, facing away from Derek, looking out over the open edge of the building where the wall hadn't been constructed yet. He was wearing a hard hat and a high-visibility jacket, standard construction gear, but something was immediately wrong. Derek knew every person on his crew that night. He had checked them all in himself, and this man was not one of them. He called out, "Hey, who are you? You're not supposed to be up here." The man didn't respond. He didn't move. He just stood there, still as a statue, staring out into the dark city below. Derek's first instinct was that someone had wandered onto the site. Trespassers were uncommon. Curious teenagers, homeless individuals looking for shelter. He wasn't panicking yet. He started walking toward the man, his flashlight trained on him, his hand already reaching for his radio to call the rest of the crew. He got within 30 feet, 20 feet,
And then he stopped again because something was wrong with the man's proportions. His arms were too long, not dramatically, not in an obviously impossible way, but just slightly too long, enough that Derek noticed it, enough that his brain flagged it as wrong before he could even consciously process why. He raised his radio and called down to his crew. "Hey Marcus, you on the 3rd floor?" A crackle of static, and then Marcus's voice came through. "Yeah, boss, why?" Derek kept his eyes locked on the figure. "I've got someone up here on 4, not one of ours. Can you bring someone up?" He released the radio button, and in the silence that followed, he heard something he still cannot explain. A sound, not a voice, not footsteps, a sound like something breathing, but slow, deeply, unnaturally slow, like the breath of something much larger than a man. And then the figure at the edge of the building turned around. Derek never described the face in full detail. He said that when he thinks about it, his mind refuses to hold on to the image clearly, like a dream that dissolves the moment you wake up. But he said the eyes were wrong, completely wrong. He said it was like looking at something that had learned what a person was supposed to look like, but hadn't quite gotten it right. It looked at him for 3 seconds, maybe 4, and then it stepped backward, off the edge of the building, and was gone. Derek ran to the edge and looked down. 4 stories of empty scaffolding and darkness, nothing below but concrete and shadow. When his crew reached him 60 seconds later, they found Derek sitting against a steel beam, his radio in his hand, completely unable to speak. It took him nearly 10 minutes before he could form a sentence. He quit the next morning, and he has never worked a night shift since. Now, some people who hear this story say Derek was tired. They say the human mind plays tricks in the dark, especially on sleep-deprived workers on high structures in the middle of the night. And that might be true. The mind is a powerful thing, and exhaustion can create images that feel incredibly real. But here's what I keep coming back to. Derek's crew found something on the 4th floor that night, after he had run to the edge and looked down. They found one single muddy footprint in the concrete dust, just one, right at the edge of the building where the figure had been standing, and the footprint was pointing inward, toward the building, not toward the edge. Something had come from the outside and gone back.
The second story tonight is one that genuinely disturbed me when I first read it. It was sent to us by a woman named Carol, who worked as a night shift safety officer for a renovation project at an old hospital building. The hospital had been shut down decades earlier and was being converted into luxury apartments, a project that many of the local workers apparently thought was a bad idea from the very beginning. The building was enormous. Multiple wings, long corridors, outdated infrastructure, and the kind of heavy silence that old medical buildings seem to carry with them like a weight. Carol had worked renovation sites before, but she said this one always felt different. She said the air inside the building felt thick somehow, heavy in a way she couldn't describe. She had been on the project for about 3 weeks without incident. Then came the night of the 14th. She was doing her standard walkthrough of the basement level, checking fire exits, logging environmental readings, and making sure the demolition team had properly secured the areas they'd worked on that day. The basement was the oldest part of the building and the least renovated. It was dim, even with portable lighting set up along the corridors, and it smelled strongly of damp concrete and something else that Carol always described as metallic. She was near the end of her walkthrough when she noticed a door she had never seen before. Now, she had walked this basement corridor dozens of times. She knew every door,
every storage room, every utility closet on that level. But there it was, a heavy metal door set slightly back into the wall, with a small placard next to it that read Room 0. She stood in front of it for a long moment. She wasn't sure why she hadn't noticed it before. The handle was a large iron lever covered in rust. But here's the thing that sent the first chill through her. There was light coming from underneath it. Not much, just a thin line of pale yellowish light at the base of the door, but it was there. Carol was a safety officer. Part of her job was to investigate anything unusual, anything that could be a hazard. She told herself that was why she reached out and pulled the iron lever. The door opened with a groan that seemed to come from deep inside the walls, and Carol stepped inside. The room was small, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet. The walls were bare concrete. There was a single overhead light, the source of the glow she had seen from under the door, but it was strange. The light was on, but there was no switch on the wall and no visible wiring running to the fixture. It simply hung from the ceiling, glowing with that dim yellowish light as if it had always been on. And in the center of the room was a chair. Just a chair, wooden, old, and on the chair there was a small pile of what looked like patient files, old medical records, their covers worn and brown with age. Carol said that every rational part of her brain was telling her to step back out, close the door, and radio her supervisor, but she felt pulled. She crossed the room and picked up the top file from the pile. She opened it. The file was blank. Every page completely blank. She went through the next one, blank. She went through every file in that pile. Every single one was completely empty. She set them back down. She turned to leave, and then the light went out. Total darkness, absolute and immediate. She grabbed for her flashlight and switched it on, and the beam hit the wall in front of her, and she saw something that made her physically stumble backward. Words scratched into the concrete wall, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, scratched at different heights, different angles, like many different people had added to them over many years, and they all said the same thing, over and over and over again. It knows you're here. It knows you're here. It knows you're here. Carol doesn't remember running. She remembers being in the corridor. She remembers her radio in her hand. She remembers the voice of her supervisor asking her to repeat herself because she wasn't making sense. When they sent 2 people down to check the corridor, they spent 45 minutes searching the basement wall by wall. There was no door. There was no room 0. No room matched her description anywhere in the basement. There was, however, a section of wall near the end of the corridor, solid concrete, where if you pressed your hand against it, you could feel a faint vibration, almost like something breathing on the other side. The project manager had that section of wall demolished the following week. What they found inside was a sealed chamber that had been walled up sometime in the 1960s. The room contained a single wooden chair, nothing else. No explanation was ever given for how it had been sealed or why.
Story 3. Follow the Knocking. The final story tonight belongs to a man named James. James worked on a night crew that was building a new bridge over a river crossing in a rural part of the country. He had been a construction worker for 15 years. He was a father of 3. He was a church-going man, grounded and calm. He had, as he put it, no imagination for this kind of thing. James submitted his account with a disclaimer. He said he knows how it sounds. He said he has told very few people about it in real life because the ones he has told look at him differently afterward. But he felt that he needed to put it somewhere. Somewhere it would be heard. The bridge project was deep in the countryside. The crew worked nights because the traffic volume during daylight hours made it impossible to do the heavy structural work safely. The site was surrounded by dense woodland on both sides of the river. During quiet moments, you could hear the water below and the sound of the trees moving in the wind. It was on his third week of nights that James first heard it. Knocking. Coming from somewhere below the main bridge platform, from the understructure, the space between the construction and the surface of the river. 3 slow knocks, a pause, then 3 more, slow and deliberate, like someone trying to signal from beneath. James assumed it was pipes. It assumed it was the natural settling of the structure. He made a note of it and moved on. The second night, it happened again, this time longer. The knocking went on for nearly 20 minutes before it stopped. James radioed it in and was told the structural engineers would check it in the morning. They did. They found nothing. No loose materials, no explanation for the sound. On the third night, the knocking began again, and this time it moved. That's the part that James says he still cannot find a rational answer for. The knocking started from the same general area as before, but then it began to travel. He could hear it moving, slowly, deliberately, from one end of the understructure to the other, back and forth, like something pacing. And then one of the junior workers on his crew, a 22-year-old kid named Finn, said something that made the whole crew go quiet. "It's getting louder," Finn said. "It's coming up." They all listened, and he was right. The knocking was getting closer. It was moving upward, through the structure, toward the platform where they were standing. James gave the order to pull back. He moved his crew off the bridge platform and onto the bank, and he called his site manager. The manager was annoyed. He told James to stop letting the new kids spook the crew and get back to work. James stood at the edge of the bridge and looked out at the platform. The portable lights were still on out there. The equipment was still running. And as he stood watching, the knocking reached the platform. He could hear it now without any effort. 3 slow, heavy knocks, directly beneath the platform's surface, directly beneath where his crew had been standing. Then, silence. Then, and this is the part that James says broke something open in his chest, a voice. Not words, not language, just a voice, low and hollow, like something speaking from the bottom of a well, humming in a tone that had no business coming out of a human throat. It lasted about 10 seconds, then it stopped. The knocking never came back. Whatever it was, it went quiet after that one sound, as though it had found what it was looking for, as though it had confirmed something. Nobody on the crew ever heard it again. But James said that for the rest of the project, several weeks, not one single person on the night crew would walk across that bridge platform alone. Not even the foreman, not even James himself. Because when you're standing out there in the dark, above the river, in the middle of the night, and you look down through the metal grating at the black water below, sometimes, James said, you get the feeling that something is looking back up, waiting, patiently, like it has all the time in the world.
3 stories, 3 workers, 3 moments in the dark that none of them will ever fully explain. And here is what I want to leave you with tonight. These are people who were simply doing their jobs. They were not looking for anything strange. They were not in haunted locations by choice. They were just working, showing up like they always did, doing what needed to be done. And yet, something found them anyway. That's the thing about the dark. It doesn't wait for you to go looking for it. Sometimes it finds you right where you are, in the most ordinary moments of your most ordinary day. It finds you on the job. It finds you in the corridor. It finds you on the bridge. And when it does, all the experience, all the practicality, all the level-headed logic in the world isn't enough to explain what you saw or heard or felt. Stay aware. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, in the dark, in an unfamiliar place, in a space that doesn't feel like it should, listen to that feeling. It has kept people safe long before we had words for it. And if you ever find yourself working through the night in a big, empty structure and you hear something that has no good explanation, don't go looking for where it came from. Just leave. Leave and don't look back. Thank you so much for spending this dark hour with me here on Mr. Shadow's Stories. If these stories reached inside you and left something behind, that cold feeling, that quiet chill that stays long after the screen goes dark, then you already know this is the channel for you. We have so many more true stories waiting, more real accounts from real people, more darkness to explore together. So do one thing before you go. Hit that subscribe button and follow the channel. Turn on your notifications so you never miss an upload, because the next story might be even darker than tonight's. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. I'm Mr. Shadows. Stay safe out there, and whatever you do tonight, sleep with the lights on.